welcome everyone. My name is Art. I'm the founder of No Code Devs, and I'm really excited to be here today. Again, with WeWeb, we did a presentation that was more like an overview of the entire tool, and then I think Joyce actually built a job board, if I remember correctly. Using WeWeb was really, really cool, and actually really what inspired me to build something with WeWeb was that presentation. So if you haven't seen that, I'd encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and find the WeWeb workshop we did a little while back. It's super cool. So anyway, I'm Art with No Code Devs. Happy to have you here. And I'll let Joyce introduce herself. Joyce is with WeWeb.
And it was a job board using a WeWeb template and a Xano template. The reason for that is that WeWeb is actually a front-end builder, so we only take care of the design side of things. You can design any user interface with WeWeb and do logic, add logic to WeWeb, but then you connect data sources from outside WeWeb. So it's a bit different from tools like Webflow or Bubble in that respect. And that's why we integrate with REST APIs, which Art is going to show you, and Xano, Supabase, all of that. So I'm product marketing manager at WeWeb. So basically, I'm in charge of most of the communication around the product, including writing the change logs to present to all the exciting releases that come out every week, and also to write the user documentation. So when you watch a tutorial or read documentation, if you use WeWeb, if you don't understand anything, that's me. You should ping, and and I will make sure that it's clear for you. And yeah, super excited to be here with you, Art. When I saw your project on Twitter, I thought it would be really fun to do another video with you, another workshop with you, so you can walk us through what you build. And hopefully, I can answer some of your questions if you get stuck, or if anyone else has questions in the chat, I'd be more than happy to answer. There are a couple of people from the WeWeb team as well, Quentin and Kevin, who are already here, so don't hesitate to ask your questions.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for the summary. And again, it's been great to work with you and WeWeb. So really excited about WeWeb in general. It is definitely a front end builder. It's I don't know if this is the best way to say it, but it definitely feels like it's back end agnostic, meaning that you can use any sort of data source that you want, from Airtable to REST API to RSS and some others. I'll even give you a preview of that as we go through here. One thing I just want to say as a disclaimer is when I started working on this project, I was essentially, and still very much am, brand new to using WeWeb. So I am by no means an expert, but I think that's even more powerful when you see, what I was able to sort of build here on my own without certainly not any technical expertise and no knowledge of code or anything like that. So the WeWeb community was also incredibly supportive in helping me, with this, not just the WeWeb team, but actually the community of other developers that are building and are more advanced than me. They were able to help me through some of the questions that I had. So I'll share some of those learnings with you as I go. So I want to go ahead and get started, just to keep on pace here. But right where I am right now is actually within the WeWeb editor. So I'm logged in and looking at my project here. As you can see, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this project, it's essentially a tool that I built that's super simple. You just throw in a URL of any news article or blog article, or essentially any article. It could be like a change log or something like that. And what the tool will actually do is it will extract all the text from the article. It'll send it over to NLP Cloud, which will generate like a summarization or a TLDR of that article. So the inspiration for this was sort of two parts. One, there's a lot of things on the internet that I sort of want a summary of, but I don't want to take all the time to read. I thought this would be a great way to just get a summary, but there wasn't really a tool. It seemed like you could copy and paste the text from an article into something like, not OpenAI, but, into like one of these AI text tools and it would give you the summary, but then you still have to go out there and, copy and paste around the images and find all the, find all the text, which could be hard if there's video embedded, and then you have to paste it in there and it takes a few minutes. So I was like, well, it'd be really great if you could just like paste a URL and then get your summary back within a matter of seconds. So that was the sort of inspiration. And two is that I write a lot of copy for different things. So I thought it would be useful to, be able to get some inspiration from copy. If there's like a blog or a news article that I want to generate some copy for, I could just paste a URL and get some copy back or get a summary, so that will help, inspire, me with writing the copy. So that's essentially the inspiration here. And I'll sort of start at the end and then go through the different parts of this app that I built. So again, I am in the builder here within WeWeb, and I'll just show you it working. Hopefully this will be successful here, but this is just a article on the internet. Microsoft is removing emotion recognition features from its facial recognition tech. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do here is up in the builder, there's this sort of like editor mode, and then there's this like preview mode. So I'm going to go into the preview mode, which actually allows you to, see your app or your website or whatever you're building in real time. I'm going to paste this article here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. So what I've built is this little loader here that lets the, end user know that the app is working. And hopefully here within a couple of seconds, it will actually spit back a image from that article and then a summary of that entire article. So essentially, I took the data out of this URL, all the text, the raw text out of this URL. It skipped all the images, everything like that. And then it brought back a summary with an image. And I have a little tweet button here. If you were to click this, it would actually send this summary with a link out to the article to Twitter. So everything works. For me, this, fun, believe it or not, running no-code devs, doing everything that we do, this is probably the most sophisticated app that I've ever built, which is kind of funny because this is also the simplest app in terms of how it looks and sort of what you can do. I mean, it's like one thing, enter a URL, hit submit, but the workflows that are happening in the back end are really amazing. And it's not something that I ever thought I'd be able to do, as a non-technical person. And certainly a couple of years ago, you absolutely could not do this, especially with the AI component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the editor here just by clicking this little tab. And I'm going to show you some of the parts of this app and how it all works. So across
if I can just interrupt a second, I think what you mentioned, because I think you're being a bit hard on yourself, because I think the fact that you did not focus on the design is actually a really good thing. Because instead of worrying too much about the design, you went straight into, I want to build like an MVP, essentially. I want to build something functional. And I think the fact that you focused on that was great. It's like when you're first getting started, it can be tricky to do that. But I think that was a really good idea on your side.
Yeah, it's really easy, especially for me, to get distracted by the design.
Same
And I
here.
think it's it's a lot more efficient just to focus on functionality. And you're right, I did not spend any time on the design here at all, aside from like centering things. Essentially, that's all that I did. I made internet blue, but I didn't spend any other time because I just wanted this to be functional and simple and straightforward and just get right to the point as to what we were trying to do. So yeah, that is definitely worth saying, and I could spend a lot of time on this design, but I just haven't, because I wanted the UI to be functional and just have it to be a working app first and foremost. So as I was saying, the data within WeWeb, there's all kinds of different data collections that you have. In this instance, in this app, I have two different collections, and they both happen to be REST APIs. However, if you were to add a new data source, like we were saying earlier, you can actually add data from Airtable, Google Sheets, Xano, which is what we did on the last call, RSS feed, Ghost. I think they recently added SOAP. So there's a ton of different options that you can sort of connect data to. So I happen to be using REST API, but there's a lot of other things that you can sort of pull in here, which is super exciting. But going back here, I essentially have two different tools that I'm using to make this all work. The first is this extractor, and I didn't know about this tool when I built this app. So what I was, in my head, what I was trying to accomplish was like, I need to get like the text out of some article so that then I can take that text and send it to like this AI tool that will then summarize it. So my first problem was, how do I get the text out of an article? I knew there was all kinds of scrapers and things out there, but that felt kind of clunky and it didn't work. So I just sort of did some Google searching, and I was able to find this tool called Extractor API. And essentially it does what it says. It just allows you to enter a, any sort of URL, and it will actually scrape or take the text right out of the URL. And they have this like very simple API. I have no API experience, but as you can see, they have this sort of sample extractor code, and it just works. So this was the first tool that I used. And if I come back to WeWeb here, this is my extractor API source. So when I selected the source, I just chose REST API. And then you have this configuration, which essentially this URL. So it's the method is a get because I'm getting information. The URL here is this like extractor API v1 extractor, which is just this right here. So this is just this line of code.
Or can you maybe zoom in a little bit and when you're in WeWeb and other websites, because the text isn't always very visible.
Better, a little
I
better.
think so, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I was able to take the URL, and then you basically have to just put in two things into these headers. One is the API key, which is my API key here. And then the second one is the actual URL of the website that you want to sort of like extract the text from. So if you were just doing like, if you just wanted to do a one-off website, you could actually here in this value, just put the website. However, what I wanted to do and where WeWeb becomes very powerful is actually get the information from the search bar when a user enters that URL in the search bar. So if we come back here to my collection, you're able to build these formulas, and I was able to just get the search bar value from the web page. So all I'm doing is I'm getting the search bar value. Right now, there's nothing in there, but if there was something in there, then it would pull the search bar value into this. We hit continue, and there's nothing in there right now. So this is giving us an error. But if I were to come back to the app and let's just paste a URL in here and then come back here, we could test it again, and I believe it will work. So this is just sort of, on the back end, but as you can see, we successfully connected to this API. We got the domain, we got the title, we got the author, and here's the actual extracted text. So we were able to make this REST API call within WeWeb. Super easy. There were a couple things that I had to figure out, which was essentially, to put these two things here, which is the key API key, and then the URL. And then I had to make this formula to grab the URL from the search bar, but that was it. So it was super simple. I'm actually getting
Can you maybe
data.
show that? Show how you got the variable? I think it
Right
would be
here.
helpful, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
If you go here in the little var menu,
Yep. Okay.
that's where you find the
That's where you find it.
variables from your project.
Yeah, so exactly. So if you come in here to variables, that actually, because the search bar is in my project, it just shows up here, and all you have to do is click it. As soon as you click this, it will put it up here in the formula, and it'll actually even show you the current value. Again, I just put that URL in the search. If I were to change that right now, it would show, the new URL that's in that search. So yeah, you can access all your variables. Thanks, Joyce, like right in this variables tab. So that's how I connected all of that. So that was sort of step one, was getting the text to be extracted from the URL. And like I just showed you, this ran, and you can see that the actual text was all extracted here in this sort of result down here. I think that you could look at it this way too, and you could see all the text and actually scroll across and see this actually extracted all the text from that article. So that's great. The next part of this app was the connection to a AI type of tool that would allow you to get a summarization of the raw text. So I had to do a little bit of research. I think there's several different tools out here that do this this sort of thing. I think OpenAI is one of them, but actually someone on Twitter pointed me towards this tool called NLP Cloud, and it's very similar, but essentially what it allows you to do is use their AI to do all kinds of different things. So one of them, would be like generate code, which obviously we're not doing. You could do grammar and spelling corrections, a headline generator. But what I actually ended up choosing was this summarization. So get a sort of summarization of some article. So this looks a little bit scary, but it's really pretty easy. All that you really are doing here, if I come back to WeWeb, is I'm adding another data source. I'm choosing REST API, and I'm choosing the method as post, and I'm taking the URL that they provide here, this URL, and then I am adding in some of these headers, like the authorization key, like we did before in the extractor, in the content type application JSON. As it says here, these are the headers: content type application JSON, and the authorization token with my API key. So this took me, honestly, not working with APIs very much, just took me a little bit of trial and error to figure out exactly like how this works. But I would just encourage you, if you've never worked with like an API before, which I really hadn't, to just ask or try it yourself. Most of the tools give you these sort of headers and the URL that you have to use, so you can follow along, or sort of like test it out, and you can actually try it in WeWeb. And if it doesn't work or you don't have it right, it'll kick back an error. And once you get it right, you get this like green check, and it's it's super rewarding to like be like, oh wow, I just connected to a third-party API, and I'm actually able to pull this data into my project now. And you could do this for anything. You could do this with Twitter. You could do this with like I said, this is like this text extractor and this NLP Cloud, which are super unusual tools. There's all kinds of use cases though that you could imagine and get data back, and build different types of apps with the data that you get back. So anyway, so the key part here was, what I want to do is I want to send the text that I just extracted in the previous step, in this API fetch, or in this REST API fetch, and I want to take that text and I want to send it, I want to post it to NLP Cloud. So the field that I needed to access here was this text, post text. So if I come back here, what I need to actually do is access the data that was extracted in this previous step. So again, this is where these formulas become incredibly powerful. And all that I did was I connected. So as we talked about before, you have these variables, so you can access the project variables, but you can also access the project collection. So all that I did was come in here to collections, which is this center sort of cylinder here. I went to extractor, and then here's all the data that is extracted, that was extracted from the extractor API. And in data, you get all this data. So here's the URL. Here's the domain, here's the title. You actually get like all kinds of author data. You get the text data, you get images. So this is where we got the images. But what I needed here was this text. So all I did in this step was choose text, and it populates the text from the previous step. So when we hit continue, this is actually running this API call for us, and look at that, we got a result back with the summary text right there, and it's working. So we are connecting two different APIs together here, which is immensely powerful and super cool. I haven't been paying attention to anything. How is this going? Is there any questions? I'm probably not explaining this in the best way, but hopefully everybody's able to see, how I'm sort of starting to put together this app.
You're doing great. The one thing I would go to step 2, because I think if people try to reproduce, they'll run into an error. So I would like, if you go into the configuration step 2,
Yep.
you see here, there's you enable the make this request through a server. So you enabled that setting. If you disable it and click continue, you will run into an error. And the reason for that is that the NLP API only accepts requests, API requests made from a backend. And WeWeb is a front-end tool. So by default, we make API calls as a front end. And some APIs, many APIs don't accept that. They want the API call to be made from a server. So when that happens, you get a course issue. So you would get an error message in WeWeb. If you want to, we can try it live. You'll get the error message. If you click on continue, you'll get a network error. So very often when you get a network error and we have this little message, it basically means that you're working with an API that needs a server-side call. So when that happens, you just enable the make this request server-side, and then it works. It works basically. We do a little bit of plumbing on our end and send the request server-side instead of from the front end. So I just thought I'd mention that because if people try to reproduce, they might not understand why it's not working.
Yeah, that exactly. And I'm 100% sure that this was one of the errors that I encountered when I was trying to make this all work. And again, I just can't iterate enough how helpful the WeWeb community was. They have, if you go to their homepage, they have across the top nav bar, there's like a link to their community, and it's super active. And I don't think I ever waited more than like 30 minutes for somebody to respond to one of my many questions when I was building this. And, sometimes it was Joyce, like I said, but oftentimes it was just members of the community. So, these are things that I don't even fully understand, but, they have sort of thought through these different scenarios, which is great because, I would have been stuck here forever if this little switch didn't exist. So, that was definitely one of the small hiccups that I had, but, thank you for bringing that up. So these are essentially my two collections. These are sort of my two data sources. And again, just to reiterate, I'm taking data from the extractor and I'm using it in this next step, which is the NLP Cloud API call. So those are the sort of collection parts of this app. And now I'm going to jump over to more like the sort of like the web, the front end or the public facing page. And I'll show you how I put that all together. So if I jump here, I'm going to go back. So I'm still in preview mode here or test mode. I'm going to go back to this edit mode. I'm going to actually just go ahead and refresh this real quick. Just to clear out all of this stuff. Okay, so this is, if you've worked with any sort of front end builder, I think you'll find WeWeb very favorable. It's very familiar. The page layout elements are all right here. If you click this navigator button, everything drops down. You can see all of your elements. I'm going to go ahead and expand them all so that you can see everything that I have here. But it's very familiar.
You have an expand all button if you want to.
Oh, there's an expand all button. These things are in front of me all the time and I never see them. So thank you for
good. That's really good feedback.
That's actually amazing. No, this button couldn't be more obvious. I don't know why I don't see these things sometimes. I like to make things harder on myself, but this is great. Expand all, collapse all. That's a super quick way to see all of your sort of elements here, and you can toggle between elements and variables. Now, whenever you click on some element, let's just say it's the navigation here over on the right panel, you get all of your sort of settings where you can, adjust the margins, the spacing, the display, the alignment, all that kind of stuff. Everything that you would expect and more is here. One thing that I will show that's super powerful is you can actually build formulas into the displays to have like conditional viewing and that kind of thing. So that I did go ahead and do that. I'm not going to really go into, all the formatting because it's pretty straightforward, and I think it's pretty intuitive. But the thing I do want to talk about here is this search box. This is where like all the magic happens. This is where the user will enter the URL, and when they enter the URL, whenever they enter the URL and click submit, everything happens in those two APIs run their call, and then it submits back the data. So essentially what I have here is a form container with a search and a submit. And then down below here, which is actually hidden right now, you can see it's hidden. I have my collection list, which is where the data is displayed. The reason that I have that hidden right now is because I don't want the user to, see the sort of placeholder text that, comes back from the collection before they even start. So that is hidden by default, like when the page loads. And then I actually have, if I remember correctly, I have it appear once the workflow ends. So let me talk about this form container. So one thing that is important, I think, to note if you're building something like this is that you always want the workflow, which is the workflow of the app, to be on the form container. Is that correct, Joyce? So you always want to put your workflow on the form container versus like on the actual submit button. So that's one thing that tripped me up. Like I was trying to make the workflow happen when someone clicks submit, but you actually want to put the workflow, which is where all this magic happens, on the actual form container. So just FYI, that's something that I learned.
That's what allows WeWeb basically to check that, for example, if there's a required field, that it's filled. Whereas if you put the workflow on click on the button, it won't be able to do that, so there will be an issue. But if you put the workflow on the form container and the trigger on submit, then it's able to figure that out, and that's why it works that way.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That was definitely giving me some problems. Again, the community was quickly to correct me and point me in the right direction. But I just wanted to sort of point that out. So this is what I'm going to do here is you can actually see this lightning bolt, which is indicative that there's a workflow, attached to this element. If I go ahead and click the workflow here, I'm not going to go, like, just in the interest of time here, really deep into all of this, partly because some of it, I think there's some extra steps in here that aren't really necessary, and I don't want to muddy the waters at all because I was trying a lot of different things when I was building this. But the essence of what's happening here is when the user clicks submit, I am fetching the collection. I'm fetching, I'll expand this here, but I'm fetching the extractor collection and making that workflow happen. I'm fetching the NLP collection. I'm making that workflow happen. I add in some like time delays and things like that because there's actually a little bit of latency with the APIs. They're a little bit sluggish. What I mean by that is, when I send the data to the API, there's actually some time that passes before I get the result back from the API. So I just put like a time delay, but it should show you like all the cool things that you can do, like add a time delay and all kinds of things there. And then essentially at the end, what I do is I actually reset the variables so that it doesn't keep the old stale, sort of search variables and stuff in there. So I'm actually clearing out all of this stuff in the workflow to sort of give the user sort of a fresh set or the ability to sort of restart and do another search. But that's essentially the workflow. These workflows are really easy to build. You can actually really easily copy them, so you don't have to repeat work. You can move them up, you can move them down. Am I missing anything there, Joyce?
No, I mean there's with the three dots on the blue button, you can add a pass-through condition. So if something that we're actually soon be releasing like full-blown branching, so it'll be more elaborate in a little while. I don't want to give a specific time frame, but it's fairly soon. Yeah, I think, and if you scroll back to the top, you can also set up a workflow on error. So if there's an error running through the workflow, for example, if when you fetch the collection, it doesn't work, you can actually display a pop-up to inform the user that something went
Hmm.
wrong. So yeah, that can happen. And yeah, otherwise, I think your workflow is great. I think there are probably a couple of steps you could have skipped. I think the most important are the two, as you mentioned, fetching the two collections. Those are the two big steps, and then there are different ways of doing it. You decided to reset the variables, which is fine. You could also have added a button to clear the variables if you wanted
Hmm.
to, or there are many different ways you could do it, but yeah, that's it looks good and it's working, which is what matters most.
It's working. And one of the things that I thought was really important when I was doing this was to have some sort of, because it was taking some time, there was some latency again with the API. So I thought like it was really important to give the user some sort of feedback that the app was working, right? Which
Yeah.
is this loader element here. And this was a little bit tricky, but I was able to figure it out with the help of the community. So WeWeb does have some loaders, like I think they've got the spinny one, which I'm using, but I think they have some other ones as well, which is just essentially what it is. It's a loader that would give somebody, some feedback that the app was working on the back end. So, but the problem is that I didn't want the loader to display until somebody actually started the workflow, right? So the loader should not display on the page by default, and then it should only display basically when the app is working. So this is where WeWeb, again, is just so powerful. It blows my mind that if we click on this element loader and we go down to the display, you can actually edit formulas. You can actually connect it to a formula essentially to change the display based on a formula. So if I click into this, they actually have this. I don't know if this is a variable or what you would call this, but essentially what I'm doing is saying is if my extractor or my NLP Cloud REST API is fetching, when fetching means it's getting data, then it will display. Otherwise, it won't display. So very quickly, I was able to, there might be another way to do this, but I was able to, put some logic into the app that would say only display this loader when it's fetching. Once it stops fetching, okay, remove the display and then everything else will pop up. So I thought that was really cool and just shows you the power of how you can, build these sort of like logic-based events into the app without any code. There's no code here. So I'm just literally clicking, is fetching right here, and it loads this into the formula. And then you have all these different functions. I just chose or. So it was super easy. It's point and click. You don't really have to do anything more than that. So I thought that was a really cool element. And then I'll go down here into the collection and just show you how I binded the text that displays in the image to the user. So again, I have this text element in here, which is in my collection list when the data comes back. If I go ahead and click this, all I'm doing is I'm accessing this collection and I'm choosing what I want to display to the user is the NLP Cloud summary text. So if I go back here, basically what I want is the summary that comes back from this REST API call. So, so when I come back here, and I'm just getting my NLP Cloud data summary text, and then the image, the same sort of thing. I'm just getting the image from the extractor data in an images 0, which essentially if we come into here, so I didn't actually just run it, so I don't have access to the data. But when you do run the API, you get all the data, and then you can actually just point and click and choose. There's all kinds of images. I think images 0 just sort of meant like the first image. If there were
First
multiple
one.
images, yeah. So if there's like an article that has like 10 images, I was just essentially telling the app to pick the first image. But you could choose, any number of images. So
And
that's how I'm
if
getting
I
the images stuff.
if I may, something that's kind of interesting for people. So for people who have no experience with code, it won't be as interesting. But for people who have a little bit of experience with code, or even we have a lot of developers who like, who just like to go faster with WeWeb and Zano than, building the backend and the front end from scratch. So the 0 is what you would have in code. It's like the first item of a list in code of an array is 0. It's for calculations, but anyway, so the like WeWeb, in a similar way to Webflow, basically uses the same logic and best practices as code, which is really cool because it means like when you learn a tool like WeWeb or like Webflow, the skills that you learn while using them, you can transfer them to other tools that or even to real code, as you progress, if you're interested in learning code, it helps you. There's the same logic from Webflow, from WeWeb, from a writing a Vue.js component that you would import in WeWeb. So I think that's pretty important because it's different. Some no-code tools like abstract everything completely. We've made the choice to, of course, abstract a lot of things, but still keep that developer logic, which helps you switch from one tool to the next, just like Xano Supabase do for the backend. There's a lot of abstraction, but you can still you get it, and little by little, like you Art mentioned, you didn't have a lot of experience with APIs, but little by little you kind of you get it, and little by little that builds up skills and knowledge, which I personally find really I really enjoy, because I'm same as you, or I don't know how to code, but little by little I can do pretty cool stuff now.
Yeah, and exactly that. I built this like in tiny little pieces. And I just kept adding more and more. Like first I've got the summary, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if I could also get an image. How would I do that? And I just ran those or I fetched the data from those two APIs real quick just to show everyone here. So now that I have some data, in the app, I can actually see all this data. And this is how I figured out the images. I cut down the images, and like you could see this particular article might have two different images. So you can see there's 0, 1, 2. But what I realized is like not every article is going to have multiple images. So it's the safest bet is just to stick with 0. And that's typically the first image, like you said, in the array, to use a word that I typically don't use. So, again, piece by piece, I was able to sort of put this all together and make it work. But, the end result is you get this app, and I don't know if it's actually submitting here, but you get this app that essentially you put in a URL, you hit submit, it runs all these workflows, in the back, and then it gives you the summarization in the image. So hopefully I'll refresh this, but hopefully this was helpful to someone. But I think it really shows you the power. You can see everything that's working now. This loader is only showing when everything's fetching, and then it will actually disappear when we get the summary text back, and there's everything. There it is again. And what's pretty cool is because AI is generating these captions, sometimes they'll be different. If you run the same article, like the model, I guess, will learn, and you'll get different captions, which is actually kind of cool. But you might get some different results if you keep running the same article. So I built this, in probably like 2 weeks, just in between things at night, half an hour there, 30 minutes there, 40 minutes there. And it slowly came together, and I just tweeted it out. And in like 2 weeks, I think that there was over 1,000 calls to the NLP Cloud, which is really cool. Like, I just think it's, something useful that I probably will mostly just use for myself to get article summaries. But it was a lot of fun to build. I learned a lot, and most importantly, I really experienced the power of working with data in WeWeb. It's unbelievable. So hopefully this inspires someone to build something. And there's a lot that I didn't cover, like a lot of little learnings and things, but just in the interest of time. But if anybody has any questions, you can certainly reach out to me. So yeah, we'll see if anyone has any specific questions, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, there were a few questions in the chat. One was related to Airtable. Well, one was related to Bubble, basically asking if the APIs you were using would work in Bubble. I'm not a Bubble expert, but I would think so. I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a REST API, just a call. Yeah. So I think it would work for sure.
Yep. Damir asked, said we mentioned getting data from Airtable and was wondering if we could send results back to Airtable as well. Yes, we could. And so he or she, sorry, I'm not sure, asked if it would be easier to request these APIs right from Airtable. So I've never made an API request from Airtable, so I'm not sure. I use Airtable, to create my databases, but I don't query APIs. I'm not sure if you do, Art, if it's
No, this was
if you no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, I guess if I understand the question, you could kind of like get all this data into Airtable and just like query Airtable or have a direct connection potentially to Airtable. I've never worked with their API. I know their API is really easy to use. The documentation is really good. But this was, in all honesty, this is probably the first successful work I've ever been able to really do with an API. I've done some like webhooks in Zapier that are API hooks and things like that. But this was really the first time I was ever able to be successful, which is kind of which was great. It was really empowering to be able to like literally have no idea how to work with an API and get this all to work. Was really, really cool. I still really don't know how I did it, but I think that's telling. I think it's telling how easy it is to kind of get everything, visually up and running in WeWeb. So.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time. I remember someone commenting on one of my tutorials saying, "Yeah, I seem so excited when something works," but I think it's because I am excited. Like I'm not a developer, and every time I do a tutorial with WeWeb, I'm like, it's like magic to me.
Yeah.
So I completely understand the feeling. Carl was asking, I'm guessing the APIs don't contribute to total collection size. I'm not sure about that one, so I would need to check with the tech team. If for others who haven't noticed, like right above from REST API, where on Art screen here you see total collection size equal 0 megabytes out of 25 megabytes. I'm not sure. I would have to check. But Carl, if you wanna email me the question at joyce@weweb.io, I'll follow up for you and get back to you on that. And Don was asking, where's the URL to try this out? So a little spoiler, Art is going to change the API key. Is going to need to change the API key of the project because API keys should be private, and we've shown it in the recording. So he will make that. So right now we can share the URL. Actually, maybe we can share the URL now. Just so you know, it won't work right now because we've already refreshed the API key and that's broken.
Yep. Let me put this in the chat here. Yeah, exactly. So I've changed the API key already. So whenever you try to do a search here, it'll just spin. This is where an error would be really good, right? It'll just spin and you won't get a result. So shortly after this, I'll republish the project, and that will then have the new API key and it'll start working again. But right now, the live site is not going to work because the API key hasn't been republished. But publishing, by the way, in WeWeb is great. It feels a lot like I've tried to learn the code before, and it feels a lot like actually committing your code. It's kind of satisfying. It shows you the build and all this sort of stuff. So it's kind of fun to publish. It's sort of like it's a weird thing, but you can see all your version history. You can see your prior commits. You have to like name each commit, which is kind of cool. Again, if you've ever tried to learn the code or you are a developer, it feels very familiar because you have to name your commits, and it gives you a really nice. It makes you're sort of like your updates very intentional, and you have to name them all. So I like that. So I just published it on this like crazy domain, but you could connect your custom domain, of course, if you wanted. I just haven't done it yet. But probably in the next few hours, I will republish this and it'll start working again. I'll also tweet it out, and then I will finally, when I send a link to this recording, I'll include the URL there, and it'll definitely be working by then. So yeah.
Nice. And Quentin from our team mentioned in the chat that for the workflow, instead of having your API calls in the collections tab and then refetching the collections in the workflow, you could have not had any collections in the collections tab and just created making the API calls in the workflow. Actually, because in preparation for this this workshop, I actually redid your project, and I had Quentin's approach as well, because that's what I'm used to, is making the API call directly in the workflow. But then I thought the way you did it was actually really smart, because if you wanted to reuse that collection in other workflows, it might, you might, instead of having to repeat the API call every time, you would actually already have the API. Anyway, so I don't think I'm not sure in terms of like a developer what the best practice is, but I thought your way of doing it was quite clever as well. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way, but I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, I'm 99% sure I got lucky there, but I'll take the credit. So yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest takeaway from this, for me, is that I literally started at zero here completely with really probably if anything, a predisposition that I wouldn't be able to do this, and was very pleasantly surprised that I was able to do this. And this just opens the doors. I mean, basically anything that has an API, you can fetch that and get large amounts of data and then show them in your project. So, whether it's realtor.com data or whatever you're into, you could probably find some sort of API that has the data and quickly bring that data into your project, filter it out, allow users to play with it. So it's super cool. So
I know that our head of front end does a lot of her testing with Pokemon API. So,
there you go.
Whatever works for you.
Whatever works for you. And most of these APIs are similar in sort of the setup. So I think once you get the hang of it, it becomes pretty easy to sort of connect to these APIs, and it starts to feel a little bit easier for sure. So anyway, yeah, if there's not any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. This has been recorded. We'll email it out. I hope it was helpful to someone. And yeah, thank you again, Joyce and WeWeb for supporting me here, and being available to answer any of the more technical questions or just the WeWeb questions. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions about this project, I would even, I don't know if I can copy projects, but I'd share this with anyone. Just email me, art@NoCodeDevs, or find us on Twitter, NoCodeDevs.
Oh, cool. Thanks so much, Art. It was really cool to do this with you, and I'm excited to see what you build next.
Yeah, on to the next project. So thanks, Joyce. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye.